Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric, and thank you very much to Interpares for everything you do for Food Secure Canada and beyond. It's a tremendous honor to be here today, and I've been struggling with what I am going to say. Eric did suggest that I make it personal. I have a feeling I got a bit too personal yesterday when I talked about how I came to feminism. But I will try and tell a bit my own story and why, after many years of working internationally, I've come back to work at home, come full circle, as it is. And as I've been preparing these remarks, I have to say it's a song from Joni Mitchell that's been going around in my head. And I see heads nodding because I know that many of you know that she's in hospital right now. So we're thinking of her. But what she said in the circle game was, "And the seasons, they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captive to the carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came." So that's a little bit what I will do. I guess I got politicized about the time Interpares turned 1. As a young university student that tried to get the Bank of Montreal to divest from its investments in South Africa. And as I did as a school project, I read through parliamentary committee hearings on disarmament, and I read through every single testimony that was given, and then I looked at what the government did, and it had nothing to do with all the people who came to testify before our parliamentary hearings. And you know, I shared that paper with some women who were organized in the Voice of Women. I'm sure there must be some women in this crowd who remember the Voice of Women. And one of them said to me, "You need to go to the United Nations and to that big disarmament march." And she says, "You can go for $40. You can get on the bus and go." And I said, "I don't have $40. And she opened her wallet and said, "Here it is. You get on that bus and you go." And I was to spend, you know, almost 30 years after that working in and around, never for the United Nations, but in and around the United Nations. So I'm going to skip over many of the things that I did, but I will talk about one in a bit more detail because I hope it will set up the story I want to tell. In 1988, the Government of Canada, actually following parliamentary committee hearings where they did listen to what the conclusions were, created the International Center for Human Rights and Democratic Development. And many of you I know in this room know that organization. I worked there for 15 years. It was shut down in 2012. But that was back in the days when it was created, where an act of parliament was 4 pages, and that included both languages. And it was back in the days when the Government of Canada believed in arm's-length agencies doing things that they could not necessarily do. And back in the day when the Government of Canada was prepared to create an organization whose unique mandate was to defend the International Bill of Rights. So a very different world from the one we live in now. And it was an immense privilege to work for rights and democracy for all those years. I worked on many continents and many issues. I met many wonderful people. I traveled a great deal to interesting places. And I attended many United Nations forums on women, on human rights, on sustainable development, and many other issues as well. And you know, you get caught up in that game, and you get caught up in the negotiations of getting an additional comma or an additional reference to gender, or you know, a reference to a certain treaty or a mention of this or that. And it's challenging, it's interesting, it's fun, it's hard work. But I got increasingly frustrated by the fact that very few people who were directly affected by the negotiations we were having had any idea that they were occurring. And so this was incredibly frustrating. It was brought home to me very much at the UN Summit for Sustainable Development in Johannesburg. I think that was, I don't dare say the year, so because I'll get it wrong, but somewhere there in the 90s. And you know, it was going to be the Green Summit, and there was going to be recycling, and they were going to diminish paper, and it was sponsored by all the big corporates and all of that. And yet there was so much junk and so much paper and so much greenwashing at that conference. But if you just went down the road a little bit to where the landless people were gathering, in order to get a plate of food, and there was food for everyone, the condition was that you bring your own plate. So no waste was actually a practice. There was no paper plates, no styrofoam cups that were being thrown away at that conference, and there was a great deal of great importance that was said there, and it had no link whatsoever to the intergovernmental negotiations going on down the hall. Thank you. So I'm going to come to my story now, and something that we did at Food Secure Canada that I think was an attempt, partly successful attempt, and something I would like to build on to make sure that the links between what goes on in the rooms of Geneva and New York actually has resonance for people on the ground, because I think that is the biggest challenge facing international solidarity. So I have the great privilege of being the executive director of Food Secure Canada, which is a national network of organizations and individuals with three main goals: zero hunger, healthy and safe food, and sustainable food systems. Our focus is on Canada, but we work with Interpares and USC Canada and many other international NGOs, and we try and have some relationship to what goes on internationally, but our focus is primarily domestic. And in 2012, the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Olivier de Schutter, came to Canada. Do most people remember when that happened? Put your hand up if you're aware that that even happened. So a fair number of people. So he's mandated by the UN Council on Human Rights to come and check into how Canada is doing on realizing the right to food. There are 4 million people who are hungry in this country. Over a quarter of our population is obese, and our soils are dying because of the way we practice agriculture. So we're in a bit of a crisis when it comes to the right to food, and things are getting worse, not better. And all of this and more was acknowledged in the UN Special Rapporteur's report. And Food Secure Canada convened a number of meetings so that people could talk to the UN Special Rapporteur directly. And we were active around the media, and we tried to get journalists to pay attention, which they did. The government refused to meet him until the very last minute, when they had a short meeting to yell at him, and they publicly denounced him as a meddling foreigner who would be better off in Bangladesh, and had no business in coming to see what Canada's record on the right to food was. So it was a very, very serious moment. It was actually the same year, 2012, when I started at Food Secure Canada, that the government of Canada closed down Rights and Democracy. And, by the way, in case you didn't know, erased its entire existence from the internet, so that if you look up what Rights and Democracy may have done during its 20 years of existence, you will not find an annual report or a publication or a meeting. It's as if it never happened. Some of us have archives at home. So his report became extremely contentious, but I was a little bit obsessed with this idea that I had, well, what's going to happen when he goes and delivers that report in Geneva? Who's going to know that he actually did that? It was sort of like a one-day media wonder. And so we organized ourselves with Olivier de Schutter to have community gatherings across the country as he delivered his report to the United Nations. So in food banks and offices and NGOs and town halls and on farms and on reserves, people gathered to listen to what Olivier de Schutter had. And at the same time, we were hooked up with folks in Geneva from Amnesty International and other organizations who were tweeting back to us what the government had said in the chambers of the Palais des Nations. All of these things that we normally don't hear. And it was a really, really wonderful experience, because I am absolutely certain that had that not happened, his report would have gone completely unnoticed. So I guess what I want to say, and this is something that is so clear in the video that just happened and so clear in the work of Inter Pares, and why Inter Pares deserves so much credit, because they do the work at home that they are doing internationally. They support CBAN and Food Secure Canada and Mining Watch Canada and many other organizations who are trying very hard to raise these issues at home and using their connections internationally to connect us internationally. And I actually think that the most important challenge for us as Canadians, and I also had the chance to work with Etc. Group and monitor technology negotiations and climate negotiations for a couple of years. And I would sit there next to Pat and I go, did you hear what the government of Canada is saying? Like, I could call a journalist. And he's like, we need to work on Bolivia. We need to work on, you know, and there was something very real about that, because we were interested in progress in the international negotiations, and we weren't going to get progress from Canada. But those of us who are in international negotiations, and I'm looking at Faris over there because it was the same thing at the World Committee on Food Security. Canada was opposing free, prior, and informed consents in the international negotiations on investment and responsible investment in agriculture. We need to connect what is going on internationally with what is going on domestically. And that's what Inter Pares does. So in some ways, I guess my message today is the most important act sometimes, not always, but sometimes the most important act of international solidarity that we can have is to work on our own government. Thank you very much.